Could I ask everyone to please take a seat? I wanted to welcome you all to the University of Pennsylvania Law School. It's great to see this crowd. It seems like everybody who knows anything about prisons is here this evening. I do wonder who's running the city of Philadelphia, given this turnout. In any event, as Dean, it's really a pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's report on and a conversation about the rise and fall of the prison population. And I don't need to tell you that there are no more important issues, really, that the city of Philadelphia is involved with than its policies toward the prisons. And let me say that we at Penn Law are really firmly committed to the use of social science evidence to try and improve public policy. And for that reason, it really is a privilege for us to host this conference and evening by the Philadelphia Research Initiative, giving its report and findings. Let me say we are not only going to hear the result of their investigations, but also undertake an investigation with the group of individuals who are on the ground in the process of running the prisons and dealing with them. We are especially pleased, of course, to have Mayor Nutter here this evening, who is, nobody cares more about these issues than him, as well as members of the judiciary and the city government who are dealing with them. Now, my formal role is really simply to introduce Rebecca Rimel, who is the president and CEO of the Pew Charitable Trust, which is responsible for putting all this together. Of course, Ms. Rimel needs no introduction. I'll do it anyway. She's one of the most highly regarded foundation executives in the world. Her career started with a bunch of firsts. She was a professor in the neurosurgery department at the University of Virginia, the first nurse ever to serve as a professor in that department. And then 30 years ago, she came to the Pew Foundation. And since then, she has literally revamped the way foundations think about their support and provided a model for nonprofit leadership. I say that not only because there are a number of people here at Penn who have worked at Pew and have friends and sing her praises, but I also have to say I teach a course on nonprofit administration, and the Pew Foundation is truly the model for us in that class. Its results-based approach ensures that its efforts will have real impact. Its research center offers a wealth of impartial and valuable data about how people live and think, and its campaigns to improve public policy really impact the environment, food, and consumer products. And for those of us who live in Philadelphia, we've seen the very dramatic results in public spaces on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway and Independence Mall and the Fairmount Waterworks through the efforts of Pew. Let me say at Penn, we talk all the time about Benjamin Franklin being a model for the university and integrating theory and practice. But that vision, I think, has been the model for the Pew Foundation, which has used its research and ideas to improve our society and really stimulate civic life. So for all of those reasons, it really is a privilege for us here at Penn and me at Penn Law School to welcome the exceptional leader of the Pew Foundation, Rebecca Rimel.
With that introduction, I shouldn't even begin because I'll never live up to the billing, but thank you. That was extremely generous. And thank you so much for hosting us in this fabulous building. The University of Pennsylvania and its law school is known worldwide, and not only for its leadership and scholarship, and so we are honored indeed to be here. We are honored indeed to have our great leader and our mayor who is joining us. And so I will make my introduction and comments fairly brief. We are proud to have launched the Philadelphia Research Initiative, and while I'm here to get the accolades, I want to identify Don Kimmelman. This was his vision, Don, for his leadership. In addition to being his vision, he masterfully recruited Larry Eichel to run this program. There was no one that I know that is more passionate about this city, more pragmatic, and more professional in his role as a journalist and now as a leader of this program. I want to take you quickly back to 1946, so you can tell how dated this story is. It is about one of our founders. He was approached by a telegram by Look magazine. Anybody remember that publication? Come on, thank you. Thank you, Barbara. You really don't, but it's nice of you to do that. Look magazine was writing an article, and it asked all of the leaders of the day, what are the 2 things that you would tell the President of the United States? And Mr. Pugh was a very shy man, and he resisted answering. But after 3 telegrams, he finally did. And he wrote back, tell the truth and trust the people. The magazine wrote back and said, don't you have anything else to say? And he said, I think that is enough. And we have followed that vision and that commitment of Mr. Pugh for many years since. And that is exactly what this program does and much of our work. It tells the truth. It provides data so that the public and policymakers can make wise decisions as they face some very, very difficult problems. And that's exactly what our leaders here in Philadelphia have been doing. And it's paying off for all of us as citizens, and we owe them a great debt. Major crime is at the lowest level in 30 years. Mr. Commissioner, we thank you, and we thank all of the people in this room for that hard work. The number of homicides is down 22%, and for the first time in decades, the city population is growing. This is all great news for a city that we love. And we've made progress on the issues that we're going to discuss this evening. For a decade, the number of prison inmates rose sharply, and that data is in your report. But we've turned the curve in the right direction. Population is down, and public safety has not been sacrificed. Perhaps you don't know that the Pew Trust works on this issue nationally through our Public Safety Performance Project. We're working with 12 states, and over several years, they have cut several billion dollars out of their budgets, and they are basically protecting public safety, making folks pay their debt to society, but they're also saving money through sentencing reform. Just think about this. How many people think of Texas as the soft on crime state? Nobody. But because of the changes that they've made, over $500 million has been saved in just 2 years. Now, I do understand that the jails in Philadelphia and prisons are different, but I think there are some lessons we can learn nationally from other states and locales, and there's a lot of lessons that we can teach them as well. We all love our boy, Ben Franklin, and we all love his quotes, as do I. And he said, an investment in knowledge pays huge dividends. Well, that's exactly what this report does. It provides us knowledge, it provides us information, and from where I stand, and this packed room, standing room only, there are a lot of people here that are here to learn, but a lot of people who have contributed to this, to not only to this report, but to our success. So, Mr. Mayor, without further ado, let me introduce you. You have been a fearless leader for our city through some unbelievably difficult times. Much has been asked of you, and you continuously rise to the occasion. And I guess the quote from the Philadelphia Inquirer's editorial page puts it best. Many Philadelphians see him as a worthy steward of a city in the midst of very difficult circumstances. We are all grateful for your leadership. Thank you very much.
President Rimel, for one brief moment, Rebecca, thank you very, very much for that introduction. I've been reading the Inquirer editorials recently, and wasn't exactly sure which one you were going to quote. The ones I like. Very much, very good. I'm going to get that one from you and keep it for all the other days. Now, you just can't imagine how important it is to have leadership of a local, regional, national, and international foundation here in Philadelphia doing the kind of work that Pew does, and I'll talk about some of President Rimel's colleagues, but I want to, for a moment, focus just a little bit on her. Time and time again, because of our challenges, even before the Great Recession of 2009 or 2008 into 09 and 10, and hopefully we'll come out of this. But way before all of that happened, we've made a lot of requests. We've had a lot of asks, we've had a lot of challenges, and the recession only made that worse. And Pew, time and time again, has not only stepped up to the challenge, but been a real partner in the things that we're trying to get done here in the city. The quality and the depth, thoughtfulness behind the research, its credibility, and the tenacity with which they go after the details is, quite frankly, something quite unique, something to be treasured and appreciated. And again, I'll talk about the colleagues in a second, but to really make that happen, of course, that has to be determined by leadership from the top and the dedication and commitment to this city, this state, and this country, and for making a better world. And for that, we all owe a debt of gratitude to President Rimel. Please recognize her. Dean Fitz, thank you very much for allowing us to be in your home. I always enjoy coming to the law school, thinking about what it would have been like to have stayed on campus just a little longer and come to the law school. Well, most of the time I just think about what it would have been like just to have stayed on campus more when I was an undergraduate, and just where I'd be today. But that's a different story for a different day. Please recognize the great dean of this law school, Dean Fitz. I do also want to thank President Rimel's colleagues as well, Don Kimmelman and Larry Eichel. The work that they have done, and I'll mention just a couple of the pieces. Early on, everyone knew that we had a serious pension and health care crisis here in the city, but the work that they did very early on in our time really helped set the tone and the stage. The work has been used directly in many of our conversations and discussions. I'll kind of leave it at that about healthcare matters, but has helped to drive an agenda for us that when you look at the fact that 25% of our entire city budget in another year or two will be consumed by those two items. Before we put a police officer on the street, before we open a rec center, before we pick up a bag of trash, before we put books on shelves in libraries, before we do anything else, 25% right off the top to pension and health care costs, that is an economic crisis, and that was before the recession. In 2000, we were spending $200 million general fund money in our pension system. Next year, that number will be $600 million just in pension costs, not to speak of double-digit increases over the past few years for health care. And so the work, again, of Pew, this report today, highlighting some of the best practices in the country and, quite frankly, highlighting some of the great things that we're doing here in Philadelphia to drive down our costs, but more importantly, drive down our prison population is very, very important. So for the entire Pew team, if we could recognize them, I'd greatly appreciate it. Our district attorney is here, and I want to thank him for his presence, but also, more importantly, his involvement in making this a safer city. Our president judge of the First Judicial District, Judge Demby, thank you for your leadership as well. Our police commissioner, President Rimel, it is not a mystery as to why crime is going down and some of the other gains that we've made. When you hire the best police commissioner in the United States of America, you expect these things to happen, but we don't want to take them for granted. Please recognize Commissioner Reentry. And his colleague all the way over on the other side, because we get full coverage here from this team. Many were surprised, and a few eyebrows went up. I actually knew what I was doing, to the surprise of some. when we asked Everett Gillison, 30-year veteran of the criminal justice system in a variety of capacities, but primarily over on the public defender side, to be our deputy mayor for public safety. And he drives that organization, police, fire, prisons, emergency management, and reentry, in such a way that the city has never seen before. Please recognize Deputy Mayor Everett Gillison. He thinks I didn't see him, but I understand the hierarchy of things, and since we go to the same barber, I always like to save Justice Seamus McCafferty for a little later on. Justice, thank you so much for being here and for your particular focus on changing many of the practices and programs in Philadelphia, specifically on the criminal justice side. Your both previous law enforcement experience as well as on the Supreme Court is paying dividends for us here in the city, and for that, let us recognize the Justice one more time. Two other partners, and I'll move on. You know, this is almost like, and it's I don't know about you, but I feel a certain sense of loss finding out in the past week or so that that Law and Order is going off of TV. But yes, it is true. But you know, as the opening goes, there are many components to the criminal justice system, and one of those stakeholders is Ellen Greenlee and the Defender Association of Philadelphia. Please recognize her. And unfortunately, when it all doesn't, you know, kind of come together and work out, our guy Lou, our commissioner, Lou Girola, ends up having to take care of business, and he is our great prisons commissioner. I've not been more proud I'm very proud of all of our commissioners, but one of our proudest appointments for someone rising up through the ranks over a long, long period of time and achieving commissioner status. Commissioner Girola has been insightful, he's been innovative, but he's been around long enough to know kind of what works, been there, done that, and we're not going to try that again. Let's try to do something different. Please recognize Commissioner Girola. Prison population down, certainly not by accident, but obviously more by design, but we still have a lot of work to do. The work of the Criminal Justice Advisory Board that we created and worked with members of the judiciary, and I see Judge Renee in the back. Hello, Your Honor. I saw you back there. Was the person who brought this idea to us, and now co-headed by President Judge Demby and Deputy Mayor Gillison. One of the first things they jumped on was not only the recidivism rate here in the city, but also that we were actually housing some folks who shouldn't actually be in our care. They should be in another system. And for that, I want to thank the entire First Judicial District. There are too many of you for me to then get myself in trouble trying to name all of you. On the other hand, I find that I get in a fair amount of trouble, and I could end up in any one of your respective courtrooms. So with that, would you please recognize the entire judiciary who are here or anyone thinking about running for judge? Please recognize them. And Bishop McNear, thank you very, very much. It was an incredible sight, the Bishop's Church, some time back, when a man of the clergy, a man of the cloth, literally turned his church into the criminal justice system south. And for 4 days, 1,249 people showed up trying to get their lives straight in at least at the time, the largest fugitive surrender program that the country had seen, as operated in conjunction with our federal partners. And we thank him, and there have been many trainings and many other members of the clergy doing the same thing. This is about partnership, it's about relationship. It could go wave by wave and row by row. Scott, I see you, the Philadelphia Bar, thank you very much for your work, and so many others. The recidivism rate in this city is much too high, much too high. And there are many people who are in jail who, but for either bail issues, detainer issues, and a half a dozen other things that I don't totally, completely understand, but challenges in the system, wouldn't be in jail in the first place. They're not dangerous. They're probably not going to hurt anyone. They are damaging their own lives. But treatment and support and drug and alcohol programs and a job and good housing, and maybe getting out of some of the poverty conditions that this city faces, with 25% of our city residents live in poverty. That only 21% of our adults over the age of 25 have a 4-year bachelor's degree. In a city and region that has 92 of the best colleges and universities anywhere in the country, if not the world. There is a disconnect there. And so making sure that reentry and treatment and education and support services are as important as anything that Commissioner Ramsey and his top team will do out on the streets. We have to help people better understand that those services and those programs are at least as important a component of how we reduce crime in the city, in the region, and all across the United States of America. So this report, again, lays out a path, lays out a roadmap to how we address these many issues, because it's not just about saving money. And Lord knows under these circumstances and for some of the things we're going through, we certainly need to save money. But it can't just be about money. It's about people. It's about lives. It's about a quality of life. It's about parents in prison not raising their children. It's about so many thousands of children who will never maybe know their family member. It's about lost opportunity. And so I want to commend everyone. I am, quite frankly, I'm not surprised that you all came out for anything that Pew might be involved with, but the subject matter is maybe not exactly, for many, the most attractive to come and talk about. This is a beautiful audience, a group of people, many stakeholders who care about these issues. This is about the future of this city. If we can drive up the education rate, drive down the dropout rate, drive up the college degree attainment rate, eliminate virtually recidivism in this city, and we have a number of programs that are showing great promise. Think of what this city and this region will have accomplished. It will only happen if we work together as partners, if we stop worrying about who gets the credit and worry more about the results. And that is a combination of local, state, and federal partners operating together in ways that we've never done before. We see all the positive signs and indicators that it is happening, but we have so much more work to do. Our administration and I am personally dedicated to this particular mission because it's not just about the money. It's about the lives. Thank you very much.
I'm Larry Eichel, the project director of the Philadelphia Research Initiative, and I'm here to do two things. The first is to recognize the people most responsible for this report. They are Claire Shubik-Richards, Senior Associate at the Philadelphia Research Initiative, and Don Steeman, Assistant Professor of Criminology at Loyola University of Chicago. Claire and Don, please stand. And I also wanted to give you a brief overview of our report. We at the Philadelphia Research Initiative set out to answer a few basic questions. Why did the population of the Philadelphia prison system rise so much for so long? Why has it declined in the past year? Is what we're seeing sustainable without jeopardizing public safety? And what will be the impact on the taxpayers? One of the most striking findings in our report is the significant rise in the prison population over the last decade, which you see there, took place at a time when the number of adult arrests in Philadelphia was relatively stable, trending lower. In other words, there was no direct relationship between the size of Philadelphia's prison population and the number of arrests. So what then determined the size of the population? Before I start to answer that question, some background may be helpful. Despite the name, what we have in Philadelphia is a system of jails, not prisons. Generally speaking, a prison is a state institution, used for the confinement of individuals serving sentences of 2 years or more. Our jail system, though, has basically 3 types of inmates: individuals held prior to trial, individuals convicted of crimes and sentenced to a period of incarceration of less than 2 years, and individuals held for alleged or proven violations of their conditions of probation or parole. Now, a violation may consist of missing a meeting with a probation officer or of committing a new crime. Back to the size of the jail population. It is a function of the number of inmates admitted and the length of time they stay. The number of bed days consumed. One inmate who stays one day takes up 1 bed day. In the past decade, as you can see there, the annual number of bed days consumed in the Philadelphia prison system rose 38%. And for the most part, as the lower line shows, this increase was driven by a rise in the number of individuals held pre-trial. From 1999 through 2009, the number of bed days used by pre-trial inmates increased by 44%. In 2009, pretrial inmates represented 57% of the population on any given day. For many of the inmates in this group, their jail stay is short, 7 days or less, while they put together the money to make bail. So why, you might ask, would pretrial inmates be taking up more beds if, as we saw before, arrests were not rising? Have the types of arrests been getting more serious? For the most part, no, although there were more arrests for drug possession and DUI. So what was happening? For one thing, bail amounts were going up, and fewer defendants were being set free without bail. In 2003 in Philadelphia, 46% of defendants were released on their own recognizance. Last year, that number was down to 40%. Contrast the use of bail today in Philadelphia, which you see there in the middle, to a couple other cities that are close by. New York City on the left, you see that 65% of the defendants are released without bail. In Washington, it's 85%. Even so, those cities report higher rates of defendants showing up for court, which we know is a serious problem here. But though the increase in the pretrial population was the largest factor that fueled the long-term rise in Philadelphia's jail population, it wasn't the only one. Over the last decade, bed days consumed by probation and parole violators increased 70%. So what then accounts for the very real decline in the population over the last year? To a large degree, the decline has been the result of a drop in number of inmates serving sentences. This actually started a while back in 2003 when the city began developing some alternatives to incarceration. It accelerated in 2008 after passage of a state law that required inmates with sentences of 2 to 5 years who had been able to stay in the Philadelphia jails to go to state facilities instead. And this has helped, it's certainly not been the only factor, but it has helped fuel a decline in the population that began in January 2009 and continues to this day. So what does all of this mean for the city's future ability to safely and cost-effectively control the population? That's what this evening's panel is all about. In our report, we talk about what the city is doing now to manage its jail population. You heard some about that from the mayor. You'll hear more about it from our panelists. But I wanted to make brief mention of some policy options for the future suggested by what we saw that other jurisdictions are doing. 1, expanding options for diverting cases away from the courts. 2, revitalizing the bail guidelines to make them an effective tool for identifying which individuals can be released pre-trial with a high probability of their showing up for court. 3, creating a broader range of services to help individuals stay in the community pre-trial and again, make their court dates. 4, developing new responses to probation violators that don't rely so much on jail. And finally, with any of this, as with the policy innovations already underway, developing measures to track performance to make sure programs actually reduce the inmate population. With public safety in mind, the challenge is to do a better job of identifying those people who don't need to be in jail. And now I would like to invite our panelists to take their places up front. And to introduce you, the Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar Association, Scott Cooper. Thank you, everyone.